From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politti and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politti here, Fonseca, Lenny, all together. 31-7 loss to Michigan. Fellas, I feel like this is one of those step back and look at the big picture kind of losses, if you can do it. I understand that, fans, you get into a game like this, you're playing the number 2 team in the country, you're 3-0, you're feeling pretty good about yourselves. You think, all right, we'll go in there and we'll get an upset, and it's not close. And I guess I'm not surprised by the outcome. I think we all thought it would be about this kind of game. But overall, I don't know. I mean, I thought Rutgers looked okay. Like I've seen a lot of these. I guess what I'm saying, I've seen a lot of these games when the Scarlet Knights go and they face off against one of the big powers in the Big Ten, and they do not look like they belonged on the field. That to me was not the case in this game. That it was until late in the game. I thought they held their own on both lines of scrimmage. I thought they did some things in the passing game which they hadn't done in games like this. I don't know. Will you guys tell me? Did you agree with this statement overall?
I think Pat could speak to this, but I think when Christian Dremel scores that 69-yard touchdown, that pregame feeling of we might win this game got a lot higher. But then Michigan is the much better team. That was obvious throughout the game, and I think that kind of really pulled through in the fourth quarter when Rutgers really kind of ran out of gas. But I agree with you. I think the big thing is that while they didn't convert on them, Rutgers did have opportunities. They did create opportunities to score. They moved the ball decently well. I thought Gavin looked great outside of the interception, which really wasn't his fault. That was more of the play call and Michigan making a great play. Yeah, I think that it was about as good as a performance as people could realistically hope for. And I think some of the post-game comments show some of the respect that Rutgers is getting, because I don't know if you saw Blake Corum, their running back, said that Rutgers came in here as a bully because of the way they won their first 3 games. And Michigan said they bully bullies. So while Michigan, if Michigan is comparing themselves to you, I think that's a bit of a compliment. And I think another Michigan player said they wanted to show Rutgers who is boss. Again, maybe not the greatest place to be coming from, but I think the fact that Michigan is talking about Rutgers that way, that wasn't happening 2, 3, 4 years ago. So it's,
of course not. Yeah.
In the big picture, step in the right direction. Rutgers is not quite good enough to pull off an upset in the big house against a top 5 team or really come close to it. But the fact that the game was kind of a game well into the second half, I think that's a pretty good sign for Rutgers.
Pat, you agree?
Completely agree with the big picture take, 100%. Rutgers took incremental steps. You mentioned the passing game, which was a huge positive. Gavin made some terrific throws that we haven't seen through the first 3 weeks. I thought that, not that Shiano opened up the playbook like he said he was going to do, but the way that Gavin was able to extend plays, hit on those intermediate routes, I thought he moved the ball really well, played a pretty solid game overall. The one takeaway that I will say I look at negatively, what happened to the running game? Of course, Michigan is a great defense, and you weren't going to bully Michigan like Brian said, but the way they came in, we talked about all week. Rutgers has an identity. They're going to be able to run the ball and keep these drives going and sustain long drives, take time off the clock. That did not happen at all. So I think that was a little bit of a setback in the big picture. They're not going to be a team that bullies Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. It's just not going to happen.
Right. You mentioned Gavin Wimsatt. We've talked about this ad nauseum about the fact that this was one of the worst passing offenses in the country last season. And you have to look at what it accomplishes this year with that in mind. And I agree with you totally. I thought he wasn't sacked. He handled the pressure well. He had the throw to Christian Dremel was just a great throw. Had a great throw, better catch, but a great throw later in the game to Jaquay Jackson. Another one to Isaiah Washington. He had not enough of them, certainly, but you're seeing some things in this passing game. You're seeing more than one receiver who can get open, and it might not matter against Michigan, but I mean, other than Penn State and Ohio State, I think you've got 6 games in the schedule that it's going to matter in, and that to me is was a huge thing. Like, I knew Rutgers would be okay defensively; they don't give up 24 points. It's seven on the offense. I knew they're going to be okay running the ball against regular defenses. I didn't know if they would be able to pass the ball against a good defense, and they did.
Yeah, and they did without, to Pat's point, much of help in the run game. I did want to touch on that. So the balance of the play calls was a bit weird in that they put 3 straight passes on Gavin Wimsatt's shoulders to start the game. Then they run the ball 16 times out of the last 19 plays in the first half. And aside from Monungai's big first run that was killed by a penalty, which we'll talk about later, and his next 2 runs from there and a couple runs from Wimsatt, they really couldn't get anything going. 1, because of, like Pat said, Michigan's defensive front is huge. 2, because Rutgers' offensive line just cannot get a push against guys that big. And when you can't establish the run game, it makes it harder to pass. Given that context, Gavin did pretty well. He wasn't pressured much, or as much as you would think. When he avoided the rush. And he connected with his wide receivers. I'd like to see, I think the wide receivers are better. Again, compared to last year, the worst passing offense in Power 5 football, maybe. Of course, you're going to be a little bit better. I'd like to see a little bit more from Jaquay Jackson and Isaiah Washington and Christian Dremel still, because I don't think, while they took a step forward, I still think there's something there to be had. And I think that tight ends, I think we can kind of give up on that theory that they will ever help in the pass game, because Johnny Langan had a couple of catches. Sean Bowman dropped the only target he got. I mean, the fact they've only thrown the ball to him 1 time in 4 games really says a lot about what they feel about his impact in the passing game. So to put all that together, and the fact that Gavin still threw for 180 yards, a touchdown, only 1 interception, I think, you got to feel good about where he's at for sure. And what Kirk Straka does for him doesn't really seem to complicate things much for him. We can bicker about the play calls, the erraticness of, you pass a lot, you run a lot, you pass a lot. But the one thing he has done has not put Gavin Wimsatt in tough situations, and that's been pretty fruitful.
All right, let's talk about the play call, because I think that's the one thing that was a little on the controversial side. And I had a 17, so when it's 17-7, it's 4th and 2 in field goal range. I had a lot of a surprising number of readers who were kick the field goal. This is not a second guess. I thought right away, this is a situation where you got to go for it. If you kick the field goal, in my opinion, sure, maybe you make it and it's 17-10. Well, you're going to lose the game 24-10, right? I mean, it's just the difference between you trying to win the game. You're in a position, you're down at that side of the field. You're not going to have many opportunities down there. If you get a touchdown, if you move the ball, I think, to me, it's just a completely different game. Did you guys feel the same way in the moment? Did you agree with that decision, or were you sort of the mind like, all right, maybe taking the points isn't the worst idea?
No, you got to absolutely go for it in that situation. No question. You're not going to get many opportunities at that point in the game on the road at the big house to hang in there and really at that point, which would have been a decisive blow to Michigan, to really hang in there even more. You can't kick the field goal. You're just delaying the inevitable at that point, like you said.
I hated the play though.
I can't be the guy that screams for screen passes for
you can't be.
And come on this podcast and be like, it was a horrible play call.
But now they throw the screen. My reaction was, now you throw the screen. We've been screaming for a screen pass. Now this is the moment you break that out. I loved it. You love the call, or you just love the screen?
Tremendous play by the Michigan defender.
Come on,
tremendous! He busted through that window.
Yeah, but if he didn't, there were like 8 Michigan defenders standing there. Someone was going to bust through. I mean, it's just one of those plays. It's a short yardage situation. Got 8 guys around a line of scrimmage. I don't know.
Here's why I didn't hate it, because Rutgers was becoming predictable on short yard situations. Right, they were running the RPO every single time, and it was either going to be Wimsatt on a keeper or a handoff to Monungai. I thought it was a good switch up. And I'm so contrarian on this topic, but I actually thought it was a good play call.
My part of me was like, bring in Johnny Langan. Let's get that off it. Let's get that short yardage unit back out there. That popped in my head. It is a second guess. I get it, Brian. You be the tiebreaker here. Did you hate the play as much as I did, or are you like with me? You got to try something.
So for the context, Rutgers was not running the ball well, as we said. One thing I hadn't mentioned is that for some reason, Monungai took all the carries in the first half, and they didn't go to Sam Brown or Aaron Young when they couldn't establish a run with him. I guess they could have gone with them there in that play. But And they also had thrown the ball 8 straight times before that. So I got to think Michigan is thinking you're going to run there. So maybe the pass is a bit of a kind of mind trick. That being said, I agree with you, Politi. I think it's a terrible play call, and I think you got to throw ahead of the sticks if you're going to go for it on 4th down.
4th and 2. Yes,
that was an issue with a couple of plays. There was a couple of 3rd, 4th downs where they threw short of the sticks by a yard or two, and I just don't. I never understood the logic there. I don't know if that's the wide receivers not running deep enough. I don't know what the issue is, but I just think you gotta give yourself a chance. I'm not sure the play was executed well, but I just think, I almost agree with you. Giant Langan would be a great idea. Just try to. I know Michigan.
I was mostly kidding there, but yes, something.
Obviously,
let's be clear.
Michigan's front 7 is elite. Like maybe, if not the best in the country, definitely top 3. So I can understand it being hesitant to give the ball to Sam Brown and saying, "Here, gain us 2 yards." But I think you got to go with something else. But going for it on 4th and 2, I think, is non-negotiable. You're not beating Michigan in the big house with field goals, especially not with the fact that your defense was giving up a score. I thought the defense played fine, but I looked at it. Michigan had 7 drives. They scored on 4 of 5 in the middle, and the only one they didn't score on is because a kid missed a field goal. Like the defense wasn't playing lights out. I think you got to kind of have to go for the touchdown. It didn't work out, but we're not results oriented here. We're process oriented, and I think it was the right call.
Right.
And I just want to say the worst play call of the weekend, and they would be screaming about this in Big Ten circles on Monday, was 4th and 1 in Ohio State Notre Dame, and they run a jet sweep.
No,
Infinitely worse.
It was totally
ridiculous play call.
I absolutely thought, and there was one of those in the moment where you're like, "Are you kidding me?" Yes,
that was like 10
Yeah.
times worse than what Shiraka called it.
Yes, indeed. They were lucky to win that game. All right. And because of the call and the situation, like I give Gavin Wimsatt no responsibility for that turnover because he couldn't, and you can't throw the ball away there. You can't look at, the play's busted. Let me just throw it in the ground, because then you give the ball back to them. So you have to try to force it in there. So in my opinion, he still has no turnovers. I mean, I get it. They scored, made a great play, but I just don't fault him for that.
I mean, he still threw an interception. It's going to go down on the stat sheet as an interception. It fully changed the game.
But was it his fault? He had to throw it in the tight coverage. I mean, I don't know.
If we're doing would be interceptions, he's probably thrown a couple passes this season that should have been intercepted.
Yes.
So for all intents and purposes,
okay,
I hear your point. But yes,
in the grand scheme, it was a great play by Michigan. I thought it was tremendous.
I'm with you, Pat. I think I agree with you guys. I think we all agree here. That's of all the people responsible for that interception, Gavin is probably the least or the second least responsible for it.
You mentioned the defense. Let's touch on that briefly. I mean, when they came out, it forced the 3 and out right away. I just thought early on, Michigan was like, all right, we're just going to run the ball up your throat like we've done every game since Jim Harbaugh's become coach here. And I just like the fact that the defensive line held tough. Now you saw later in the game, they started running to the outside. They couldn't get the contain. I get it. Like Michigan's got good coaches. They're like, okay, we'll do this instead. And it worked. And Michigan was relentless. And they looked like they wore down a little bit at the end. Is that your sense that maybe, toward the end of that game, this is the first time we've seen this defense get gassed?
Yeah, absolutely. The defense got gashed at the end. They were worn down. This is what Michigan does every single game. Absolutely, no question. But the one flaw of the Rutgers defense, they couldn't contain the edge. Yeah. McCarthy was absolutely killing them on those play fakes and read options where Rutgers was just getting sucked in and he was sneaking around the corner. And that just seemed like they had no response for that. Linebackers, I thought, played really well for Rutgers. Serene Powell was great. Deion Jennings was great. Toure was great. I just thought they failed in setting the edge. And a lot of times that's just, it's a tough play to defend, and I give the defense like a pretty solid grade in that game overall. I thought they were solid.
Brian, have we overhyped the corners? It didn't seem like it was a great game for that unit, or is it just one of those tough situation when you're putting that many men in the box to stop the run?
Yeah, I thought Max Melton had a tough game against Virginia Tech, and he had a tough stretch against Michigan. He gave up a first down on a crossing route, and then he got scored on for that touchdown. Even despite a pass interference from Max, he still scored the touchdown. I think if you're going to commit PI, you got to break up the pass. Mm-hmm. But I also think that Rutgers did not get that much pressure on McCarthy. And when you're playing against one of, if not the most accurate quarterbacks in the country, if you give him time and space, he's going to find open receivers and make the tough throws.
Right.
To Pat's point on struggling to contain the edge when he held onto the ball. Shaquan Loyal had a tough go of that. I'm not sure if he was assigned to guard that, or I don't know what the assignments were, but it looked like he was the guy there. And you're in a tough spot because if JJ lets the ball go to Corum, you got to have as many bodies as you can to knock down the guy who's maybe the best running back in the country. And if he holds it, then you're stuck. It's pick your poison essentially. Shaquan went wrong a couple ways. There was one where it seemed like he followed Donovan Edwards with Tyrone Powell, and that left the entire right side of the field open that JJ gained something like 20 yards on. But it's hard when you're playing a defense like Michigan that has great receivers, a great tight end who had an awesome play, great running backs, a very smart, sharp offensive coordinator who's throwing out trick plays in the second drive of the game, which I saw some Rutgers fans kind of seeing that with glee, that Michigan has to pull out the playbook, open up the playbook to beat Michigan, to beat Rutgers. Yeah, I just think it's a tough assignment. I thought the defense could have played a little bit better, but again, when you're playing the number 2 team in the country, sometimes they're just better than you. Just by the fourth quarter, the offensive line is leaning on you, and it's just there's nothing you could really do there.
All right, let's dive into true or false, fellas. I only got a few topics, but I think they're good ones, so let's do it. True or false? Greg Schiano has a right to be mad. The refereeing was way too lopsided in Ann Arbor. Pat, what do you think?
False. I hate that.
Brian?
False.
It can be false, and there can also be bad calls. But yeah, I mean, some of them were false starts, and the holding was it was just a bad call. I saw the replay. All right, didn't really hold them, and that was it turned out to be a huge penalty for the Scarlet Knights, certainly. So we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, true or false? The assistant coach earning his keep the most is Dave Brock. Man, I wouldn't have thought I would even have this on the list early on when that hire was made of all the assistants that came in. What do you think? True or false? Wide receivers coach earning his keep. Pat?
False. Because it's got to be Kirk Shiraka. Hello?
Yeah, that's probably right. Brian?
Are we talking about assistant coaches that were hired this offseason or just in the staff?
I don't know. Whatever you want to make it.
I guess I'll say true because I can't think of anybody else. Shiraka is a great call from Pat, but just for the sake of devil's advocate, I will say true.
Yeah, I'm gonna just for this week certainly I'll say true. I had such low expectations for the receivers, and they've exceeded them. So that's the best thing I can say about it. And that's they're running better routes. It's gotta be some coaching involved. Totally. So I'll say true. True or false? The best team in the Big Ten is ... Penn State. Pat, are the Nittany Lions really the best team in the Big Ten?
I'm really impressed with Michigan. I'm going to say false because I think Michigan is still the team to beat. But Penn State, very, very impressive. And I think their quarterback is right there with McCarthy. Really strong arm. Really impressed with what they did against Iowa. That was tremendous.
Brian?
I think Penn State might have the best defense in the Big Ten, which is saying a lot given how Ohio State played against Notre Dame and how Michigan has been playing. I think the top 3 are very close and heads and shoulders above the rest of the league. I'll say false. I think Michigan's still the best team, but I think Penn State is the best it's been in a decade, and they could definitely beat Michigan when they play each other.
Yeah, I'm going to say true. I think Penn State's better, and that I think it's them in Michigan. And I watched that entire Notre Dame game. I do not think Ohio State's. I agree with Lou Holtz here. Wow, Ryan Day's going to call me up and yell at me. But yeah, no, I think it's Penn State. All right, true or false? The offensive line shuffling is a bad idea. Time for Rutgers to pick a starting 5. Pat, I know what you're going to say here. True or false? Brian, it's pretty amazing, right? That they keep on doing it, even 46 plays, right?
True, but I don't think that's really an option. I mean, when you're switching out your center in the middle of the game and you're switching out literally every position other than left tackle, I think you're not doing that because you want to. I think you're doing it out of necessity.
It's fascinating. You very rarely see this, and I would love to talk to Pat Flaherty in some time in like mid-March. I'm sure we'll get the chance. All right, true or false? Rutgers has 6 winnable games left on this schedule. Pat, true or false?
Hang on, I'm counting.
Count them up.
Let's see.
Wagner. 1.
Let me pull on my friends. Okay. 6 is a little excessive, so I'm going to say false.
Okay. Brian, true or false?
So that would mean every team not Penn State, and Ohio State.
Winnable. I'm not saying they're going to win all 6. I'm just saying they have 6 winnable games left on the schedule.
I think Iowa's the only one I'm kind of iffy about. So I'll say true.
I'm definitely going to see true. I mean, Iowa, that game could be 6-3 in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's all I'm talking about here. Absolutely. They've got 6 winnable games left. True. All right. 2 more. True or false? If the Dolphins could put 70 points on the Broncos, then Rutgers should put 70 on Wagner. I don't know where I came up with this one, but hey, true or false, Pat? Let's drop a 70 on Wagner.
They almost did it last year, so I mean that's right in the ballpark. True.
All right, Brian.
They don't have a quarterback competition this year, so there's no incentive for 2 guys to go buck wild the whole game. I'll say false. I think the most important thing is not getting injured and treating this as a pseudo bye week, because your next 2 opponents are coming off bye weeks, and you just got your body absolutely destroyed playing Michigan and 3 must-win home games. So I will say false. The points are not as important as getting back to health against Wisconsin.
Yeah, I agree. False. You don't want to be thrown to the rat against an inferior opponent if you don't have to. All right, and finally, true or false? The Big House needs a horn. Pat, you were in the crowd. I'm guessing that this is clearly 100,000 people. The one thing that was missing in Ann Arbor was a horn.
Yeah.
True, right? True.
Mass transit just flows through the Midwest nonstop. Amtrak, M-Transit, whatever they got. Blow that horn, baby.
You need a Big House needs a horn, right? Come on.
No, absolutely not. False. They have a dog that catches Frisbees. That was incredible. Rutgers needs a dog that catches Frisbees. How about that? I will say one note from the crowd. When Michigan wanted its crowd to get loud, all it did was put, 4 or 5 words on the screen. Make some noise. That's it. They didn't announce it. They didn't blow a horn. They didn't have to do everything excessively. They just did it. And you know what? I was sitting in the bleachers. Those 2 plays right before the pick it was incredibly loud. Probably the loudest I've ever experienced. I haven't been to Ohio State yet, but it was really, really something to hear.
All right. So tell us about your day in the crowd. You hung out with Aaron Patel, Rutgers Al, two of the biggest fans, sort of legendary Rutgers fans. What did you glean from your trip to the Big House crowd?
My biggest takeaway was I couldn't believe how nice everyone was to these 2 guys. Obviously,
why would they be angry? I mean, it's not like you're Ohio State coming here kicking your ass.
What would you sat at the 50-yard line in row 3, and we're standing doing, and that is a Rutgers first down.
No, they were not. Really?
They did.
Oh wow,
they did.
It's funny.
And some guy turned around and said, "Are you really going to do that?" But that was the only time anyone said anything kind of nasty to them. And I thought they were treated with a lot of respect at Michigan. They were great fans for the most part, and they spent most of the game explaining the rebuild of Rutgers, what Shiano's done to the Michigan fans sitting around him. It was really good. And then I spent the second half up in the Rutgers section with Andrew Malkinski and his friends. And there were about 10 rows of Rutgers fans from row 90 to about 100 in the Big House. It was really something else up there, but the game was kind of getting away at that point and there wasn't much buzz. So I didn't get the full nosebleed reaction, or if people were nastier upstairs, I don't know. But my biggest takeaway, Michigan fans were great. The Rutgers people that went represented the school really well. And there was a great tailgate that the R Fund threw in a backyard about 2 blocks from the stadium. It had about 30, 40 people there. And out of nowhere, I wrote this in the story, like I don't even know if it was a Michigan fan or a Rutgers fan in a connecting backyard sends an R across the fence. Everyone goes, "You back." And it was like, people were really into it. It was fun. It was a really fun day. And if you're a fan, check out the R Fund for pregame festivities on the road, because they did a great job.
Nice. All right. Good little recap. We should send you into the crowd more often, Pat. That's going to be our new thing. Every time we get sick of you in the press box. Pat, why don't you go talk to someone in the crowd?
Yeah, hey, listen, don't spoil what we got for Wagner.
That's good stuff. All right.
One more thing I want to hear from Pat, because I do agree with his take on this. What do you think about the new tradition at Michigan where they play Mr. Brightside between the third and the fourth quarter?
Oh my God. Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. And listen, this is the guy I wrote about Lil Jovi because it makes sense. It's New Jersey. What is the connection between Mr. Brightside and Michigan? It was just, I really didn't like it. I thought it was, they got so into it and it was just so corny and cheesy. And half these kids probably can't name one other Killer song, which also bothers me. I hate it. I hated every minute of it.
I think it's very forced. I think it's like they just played a popular song that everyone knows the lyrics to, and then eventually they just sing to it. But yeah, there's no like history behind it in the Michigan program. Some guy just decided to hit play 3 years ago, and now it's all they do. So I agree with you. I am very much a curmudgeon about this too. So I'm glad your first person experience matched up with my thoughts as well.
Listen, it was only the students that really sang it too. None of the hardcore Michigan people knew what the heck was going on. So
that's a good thing because Mr. Brightside was recorded in 2003. So most of those students were not alive when the Killers released that song, which is kind of crazy.
Like I said, name one other song, then you can sing it.
All right. Strong opinions we have on the Michigan crowd.
But overall, all right. Good experience at Michigan. If you want to take a trip, I would suggest going to Ann Arbor. It was really cool.
All right, good job. Anything else we want to touch on here? True or false? We've got some more questions about the penalties coming up, so we can get into there in a minute. All right, so let's just dive into the questions from our readers. If you want to subscribe, I have a website now, NJ.com/Rutgers Insider. We'll get you there. Sign up for the texts. We are a full service podcast team here. All right. Big picture questions. Does the loss to Michigan, what you've seen from the remaining teams in the schedule, change your season prediction? We've addressed this every week. It's always a good question. And I think I can definitively say yes now. Yes, it has changed. I think they will win 6 games. I think they should win 6 games. I think if they don't, it's going to be a downer. You guys agree?
So 31-7 changed your mind that much?
Well, no, the competitiveness, the style. I thought they were even. I thought the fact that he could, I can't tell you enough. Like the fact that he completed passes. I know it seems like, this is what Jets fans must be thinking right now as well. But when you see a quarterback and he can go out and he can do some things, it just kind of opens the door that, all right, well, they should be. This team was already good defensively. I know they can run the ball against a regular defense. If they have proven they can pass, then I think they've got 6 winnable games. I'm not saying they're going to win all these games. Going to Madison's going to be tough. Going to Iowa is going to be tough. I'm not putting an L next to it before we even get there. And in years past, last year, last year I was putting L's down. And it's funny because and this is kind of an aside, but I got an email from a fan right when the game ended who kind of took offense to not offense, but who took issue with what I wrote when I said that, shrug it off. This will not change the season. And his point was like, to me, Rutgers still looked mediocre. And I replied, well, when did they get mediocre? Like they weren't mediocre last year. They were bad last year, right? They were like, mediocre was a step up from last year. Like, okay, yeah, they do look, they're not world beaters. They're not going to crash the playoff. I get it. They're not top 25 team. They're just better than last year. Clearly, we thought that from the beginning. They proved it in the first 3 weeks. I thought they proved it again. So I think the overall body of work gives me, I think 6 is, that's for me, it would be a disappointment if they didn't get the 6.
Totally fair. I think you hit on a lot there. What I liked that you said, the wheels didn't fall off in this game is what I'm trying to say. They hung in there. Like last year, the wheels just completely fell off. Turnovers. This is a team that's not going to turn the ball over. They're going to play good defense, and the floor is getting higher and higher each week.
Yes, I would 100% say that if they don't make a bowl game, it is a disappointment now. Like you have to win 2 more games because you're going to beat Wagner. Michigan State is an absolute abomination. They're ready to just kind of end the season now. Their players might start entering the portal this week when Mel Tucker officially gets fired. And then Indiana is just an abject disaster. They almost lost to Akron. They needed 4 overtimes to beat them. They are a mess. I mean, if those two games aren't wins, then you got to think that they could be competitive against Wisconsin, as we talked about. Iowa isn't going to beat anybody by more than a score, so you're always going to be in that game. And Maryland looks really good.
They do look really good. That's Maryland might be your third hardest game remaining at this point. Yep, absolutely.
They look really good, but you get to that game with 5 wins. It's winner take all to make a bowl. You got to make a bowl game. You can't not make a bowl game at this point. Barring the caveat is always that someone gets hurt, Gavin gets hurt, God forbid. That is the only real excuse, I would say. Anything else, 6 wins is the minimum expectation for a successful season now.
All right. Joe at the Shore wants to know, I was listening to the post-game press conference and reading between the lines, Schiano sounded like he was pretty darn happy with the way the team played. He just won't actually say it. Did you feel the same way? You guys were there. Tell me, did you think you were now amateur? You're still getting your degree in Schianoology, but what did you think for the most part he was pleased? Is that the right word? I mean, not pleased, but tell me.
I think he was, I don't know if upset is the right word. He was pissed at the officiating based on his very cryptic halftime comment and on his, he didn't want to really elaborate on it, but then he's talking about the process where they hand in their grievances to the head of officials of the league. Something tells me that there's going to be a lot of complaints to the head official this week, head of officials.
What's the biggest complaint you think? Is it the defensive backs? I can't imagine one holding call. Is what
the holding call? So I don't know what he was talking about in his halftime comment. That was just a bit bizarre.
If you weren't watching the game, he said, what was it exactly? He said
some things aren't right out there.
Right. Yeah.
When he was asked about the penalties, he said some things going on. There's some things that aren't right out there. The holding call is the only real one I could think of that was egregious in the first half. I thought the 2 false starts were fine. I don't think Michigan committed any penalties that weren't called. And then in the second half, the refs throw a flag for unsportsmanlike conduct, then pick it up and don't call it. I thought that was a good call, to be honest with you. But I imagine if you're Rutgers, you want that to stand. I don't know. That was really my takeaway. And a really quick aside on the officiating. I know Rutgers fans feel like they got the short end of the stick. Michigan had some spots that were pretty bad, like half a yard short. They had 2 4th downs that probably should have been first downs. The officiating was bad on both sides. As I always say, Don't mistake for maliciousness what can be attributed to incompetence.
Well said. Well said. I just want to say, to answer the Schianoology, I thought he knew that his team set out to accomplish what it was supposed to accomplish, to show that this team has taken another step forward. And I think deep down inside, he was impressed from that standpoint. They matched up physically. They turned the ball over once, so that was huge for him. So I think deep down he was happy from a sense that they showed some competitiveness, and of course they didn't win the game, but at the end of the day, like we keep hammering, they were in it pretty late. So.
All right, another question, Frank from Hillsborough on the offense. Does Wimsatt have any authority to change plays once he gets to the line of scrimmage and sees the defense? There were a couple of 3rd and 4th downs early in the game where you can see that the run wasn't going to work. Plus the stupid screen in the second half. Do coaches trust him at all? It's a great question. I think he does, but you guys tell me. Does Wimsatt have the authority to change plays?
I don't know, to be honest. It looks like sometimes he goes to the line of scrimmage and talks to his linemen and makes adjustments. I don't know for a fact if he does. But I would have to think if he's your starting quarterback, you trust him to.
Right. And he's not changing it he probably has another play that he can change it. You can check off to. He's not changing it to something in the back of the playbook. Like, I don't think that's happening. Right. Pat?
If a quarterback can't change a play at the line of scrimmage, he doesn't deserve to be in the game. And I think one of Shiraka's biggest things that he said over and over again when we talked to him was that I want the quarterback to be an extension of me on the field. Right. So like, if you take that for what it is, of course, he's going to have some authority there. So I would say he absolutely has authority to change the play.
Another question in the passing game. For one drive, the passing game looked downright, dare I say it, effective. Ended with a pick 6, of course. But why can't we mix in a few medium depth passes through the rest of the game? Passing game was non-existent in the first half with the exception of the TV. He can obviously make some throws our quarterbacks haven't been able to make in a decade. Why aren't we using it? Okay. I mean, I think it's a valid point when you saw that drive again. Like they needed to move the ball, and Gavin did. Are they underusing him now? It's crazy that we would get to that point after being worrying that he had a short leash. But what do you think? Do they need more medium range passes?
The number one priority of this offense is not to turn the ball over. They're obviously very risk adverse. And I think that is why they don't throw those balls to the middle of the field as much as people want them to. It seemed like a lot of the throws were to the boundary. I know that Jaquay Jackson, that diving throw catch he made, the 2 Isaiah Washington catches that he made were all to the sideline. It feels like most of his passes are that way. They just don't want to put the ball in danger, don't want to put it in the middle of traffic. Should they throw it more? I think Gavin has kind of shown that he could be trusted to do so far. I think he can make the throws. I just don't think the coaches are going to risk it when they don't have to. I think they did it in that drive because they're down 2 touchdowns and they need to score. I think if you're in a game like the first 3 where you have a lead, you're going to be a lot more conservative than as they usually were in those games.
I just want to make a quick point. Look at what JJ McCarthy is, the high level of completion percentage. He's not throwing the ball 20, 30 yards down the field. He's an effective mid-level to short yardage passing quarterback. And that's the Rutgers dream scenario, to have Gavin Wimsatt play like JJ McCarthy. That's the ceiling of this offense.
All right, another question about the offense. Now that we have 5 capable running backs that are healthy, how do we divide the carries? Sort of a fascinating thing. And Kyle Monangai, I'm not sure if we got to the bottom of why Monangai was on the bench there in the second half. They got away from the run too soon. I don't know. We can agree on that one. Aaron Young had a great run late, and we still have not seen the Sam Brown of early last season. So how do you divide it up now?
There's no good way to ask Shiano this question, and I wish he would answer it honestly.
He's not going to answer it honestly.
He's never going to answer it, because it really is a conundrum. You have so many different backs that all have all these different styles. They all can do different things. But it seemed like last year when Sam Brown was full go, full rhythm, he just needed some work. And like Monangai, he got better as the game went on. I have no idea how you divide this up. I really don't.
We haven't seen that Sam Brown yet, though.
Absolutely. And we thought maybe against Michigan, a team that you were going to need a physical running back to change things up. I think that's why you saw him in the second half, because they knew it wasn't working with Monangai. They wanted to bring that physicality a little bit. I think that was what I read from that situation.
I think they're easing him back in because he missed a lot of training camp and he still has to get into game shape, and they don't want to risk him playing too much too early and getting hurt again. Kind of just easing him in. And I think that when you evaluate the risk, is he going to be the difference between losing to Michigan by 24 points and pulling off the upset? No. So it's probably not worth it. I could see him playing a little bit more against Wagner and being unleashed, so to speak, against Wisconsin. I think they don't really have 5 running backs they're going to use. I think Al-Shadi Salam's role has been pretty defined, that it's going to be very minimal. I think Jayshon Benjamin, when you get those 2 veteran guys back in Brown and Young, he'll be kind of pushed to the side. It'll be 3 guys. I think Aaron Young looked good when he played, though it was late in the game. I don't know how much Michigan was keen on him, but I think you use him as the change of pace, catch the ball out of the backfield guy. I think you use Sam Brown as your primary guy, run between the tackles, get tough yards. And I think you use Monangai as the guy to come in when the defense is tired and you need a guy, like we say, he's better late in the game. Give him the rock in the third and fourth quarter, let him kind of run wild, and let Sam Brown be the guy that kind of softens up the defense, so to speak. That's the ideal scenario in my mind. I don't know if that's what they're going to go with, but I think it's very as good as Kyle Monangai was in the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm not taking anything away from him. He was great. He earned the Big Ten Player of Offensive Player of the Week award. Sam Brown is the best running back they have, I think, by far. I think when he's healthy, they're going to ride him. And I think as good as the offense looked in the first 3 weeks, I think they'll look even better when he's the main guy getting the rock.
Yeah, I agree with that in theory. I just haven't, until we know that Sam Brown is going to be the Sam Brown against Indiana last year. I totally agree. All right, couple more questions about the offense. Someone wants to know when do we think Chris Long is going to return to the active roster? And along those lines, why is Rashad Rochelle not getting any playing time on offense? Feels like a numbers game with Rochelle. What do we know about Long?
It's really hard to know exactly what these injury situations are. I think the Long injury seems more short-term than long-term. I would expect him back at some point in this really important stretch.
Chris has had an issue in staying healthy. That's been really his big knock throughout his career. I know the Rutgers staff is high on him and they think he could be their best receiver, one of their best receivers. He just can't stay healthy. I don't know what the specific issue is. The fact that Shiano has not said it's season ending seems to tell me that They think he'll be back. But Victor Konopka was a guy who was never called a season-ending injury until the end of the year last year. And I think the chances of him coming back throughout the whole time wasn't highly likely. So I don't know. I do know that they could really use him. I think, and as much as you've been praising the wide receivers, I think he adds a different dimension. And obviously, if Nassim Brantley is ever able to get out of NCAA purgatory, he would also add a different dimension. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We don't know about his situation. The sooner he does come back, though, the better for Rutgers.
Well, take Brantley out of the equation. I doubt we're going to see him at this point. But who? So answer this. So give me the same question with the running backs question. What are the ideal combinations for receivers? Because I think we're seeing pretty close to it.
Yeah, to answer your question on Rochelle, which I just remembered was also part of it. I think he's just, Christian Dremel has the slot reps. I think
Christian Dremel, exactly.
Yep. They had 46 offensive snaps against Michigan. That's nothing. That's nothing, right? So when you have that limited snaps, there's really no need to rotate guys in, especially when Dremel's playing as well as he has. I think in a fully healthy room, Joey Jackson is going to be the number one guy. I think Chris Long would probably be a starter. I don't know if he take out Washington or Dremel, but I think he'd be a starter. You have Dremel and Washington kind of rotating in, filling slots. But I think you're right. I think this is kind of what they've got. I don't know if it's enough. It's been enough so far. Will it be enough through the heart of the Big Ten schedule? I don't know. But yeah, Bo Melton and Leonte Carroo are not walking through that door.
All right, a couple more questions. We've got a bunch of special teams questions. People want to know why, and put me on the list of people who want to know this. Why have we stopped kicking the ball out of the end zone? It's like the first 12 kickoffs. So that's great. It's a good strategy. What every NFL team does. Now we've got like with their punt, the shorter kickoffs. I don't understand it either. I'm not sure you guys have the answer to this, but I'll try.
It was at one point the wind was blowing pretty strongly at where Rutgers was kicking off. I don't know if that made a difference. Like they weren't going to kick the ball out of the end zone might have been a concern, but to do it 2 games in a row is more, to me, a strategy than worrying about something like the wind. Right? Maybe that's a Wednesday question for Shiano.
Good one. There you go.
Maybe we should write it down.
Write it down.
It did work out in one play because Michigan didn't call a fair catch for some reason at the 5-yard line, and then the kid got immediately tackled, and Michigan was backed up in their own side. But yeah, I don't get it either. I think touchback is the safest option, and I think if you're able to do it, you should do it every time.
All right, we got a bunch of random in the other category for questions, and a couple of them, Pat, I got to be honest with you, I'm a little afraid to broach here because we don't know. I want to have lunch today. There's some things I want to do for the day, but someone did want to know. I know it's football season. Everyone's excited about basketball, but I have to give my 2 cents on the greatest soccer player of all time. This is Rob. I think it might be Rob Helfgott. I don't know if it is, but anyway, this is Rob. Brian's Messi versus Pele analysis is troubling because Franz Beckenbauer is the greatest soccer player of all time. 20 seconds. That's all we're going to give you. I'm going to start the clock now. We're going to pretend this is the debate. All right, go ahead. Give your opinion on Franz Beckenbauer.
Franz Beckenbauer was a revolutionary defensive player, one of the greatest players of all time, maybe the greatest German player of all time. He couldn't shine Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi's shoes. So I appreciate the different out there take, and I think there's some merit. I think, respectfully, you don't know ball, my friend.
Wow. Okay. Oh, all right. You don't know ball.
To the point.
To the point. I tell you, I was worried. I think if I hadn't established that we had 20 seconds for that, it would have been a disaster. Someone else wants to know your strategy. I want to see Brian's receipts for his top 25 vote, which I can't imagine anyone on earth would care. But here, someone does. This is a reader who wants to know how you do that and why, and what it would take for Rutgers to be a top 25 team.
There are a lot of Florida State fans who a month ago really wanted to know my process and why I didn't vote their Seminoles as the number 1 team in the country after they beat mighty LSU. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people wondering why I still voted for Colorado this week, even though the fact they got spanked in Eugene, Oregon. Mm-hmm. My process, I cover a college football team. I don't know if people know this, but I spend my entire Saturday covering one team. If I'm lucky, I watch some other college football games sparingly. I watched the Ohio State Notre Dame game. I watched Penn State, Iowa. I was lucky we had a noon kick. Sunday morning, I wake up, I check the scores. I look at some advanced numbers. I try to watch some highlights. And then I have to do an enviable act of picking 25 teams, knowing that 26, 27, 28 are going to be really pissed at me. And people in the top 10 who feel like their team should be 2 spots above. And there's a conspiracy in my household that I was born with the sole purpose of making sure Florida State isn't the number 3 team in the country. And then so I just sit at my desk and I get tweets, DMs, emails. You're an idiot. You're a dummy. What are you doing? Do you watch football? Do you know ball? Brian Fonseca is the worst writer of all time. Get a new job. I hear Walmart has an opening. Anyway, so that's my process. Don't become an AP top 25 voter. Please. It's not worth it. Tell your children to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be a garbage worker. Those people have noble jobs. I don't. I just peddle garbage and I get yelled at for it.
You do. He does. You do realize that you don't have to do this, right? This is not a job requirement. You've accepted this role here willingly. You've agreed to do it. Someone asked you. I don't know who's the person that asked you to do this. Was it Canavan?
It was Tom Canavan of the
Tom
AP.
Canavan of the AP. Yeah. And so you could have said, Tom, thanks, but I really would rather not do this. You could have done that.
If you want to see Brian's receipts, it's on Twitter every week. And he is pretty far from the median when it comes to voting, which I think is noble. I think that's noble.
Stand out. Go out. And unless you are completely wrong about something like, say, the greatest soccer player of all time, you should go out there and stand up on your beliefs. You should, you should make a statement. This is what I think the number 1 team in the country is. And I don't care what the haters say. I like it. Good for you, Brian.
That's what Brett McMurphy does.
Good for you.
Here's what I'll say. I always hear about people complaining about their team isn't ranked high enough. I've had Penn State at number 4 this whole time. I have not had one Penn State fan say, "Hey, Brian, thank you for believing in my Nittany Lions." Not one person. Anyway, what does Rutgers have to do to get ranked? They had to beat Michigan last weekend. Obviously, they didn't. They're probably going to have to win their next 3 games and be 6-1. Maybe they would have to be 7-1 before Ohio State, I believe. Is my math correct?
Correct.
Okay. If they're 7-1 going into Ohio State, they'll be ranked.
What about 6-1 going into whatever game that is? Michigan State. What's the game before Ohio State? I get the order wrong all the time. Indiana. 6-1 going to Indiana.
I'm not sure because what's the big win you have there? Wisconsin. Your best win is Wisconsin on the road.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin's not ranked. You don't have one ranked win.
Yeah, just for the hell of it, throw us a bone here. Come on, give us something to talk about in the podcast.
Well, I have to, of all people, I have to be the one that votes Rutgers in last. Because if I vote Rutgers in, if I'm the first person, I'm a homer. I can't do that. And then if I'm the last, I'm a Rutgers hater. I'm literally between a rock and a hard place. I can't win here.
Throw Maryland the bone. Throw Maryland the bone. How about that?
If I didn't vote them 25, they were 26. I think I put Kansas over Maryland.
Kansas over Maryland. Man, decisions. All right, enough about that. Good job. Good questions. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in. We didn't get nearly to all of them this week, and I apologize for that. What else we got? Ooh, 9-0 field hockey, baby. Woo! How about that?
Best team on campus, best starting program history. Humongous game on Thursday against the top 10 Maryland team. I incorrectly said that Rutgers was the second highest ranked Big Ten team. I forgot about number 1 Iowa.
Iowa? How did Iowa get number 1 in field hockey? They don't play field hockey in Iowa, do they?
I don't know. They're eating a lot of corn and getting really strong. I don't know.
Someone confirm that for me. I thought field hockey was like a East Coast thing. Was that just across?
Baby?
It is, but Iowa has a great tradition. As a field hockey household here, I can confirm that when my wife was playing field hockey, that Iowa is a really good program and a top 10 team every year. So. Yeah,
I want you to.
Maybe not your Tar Heels.
But, you're not throwing around enough field
a lot
hockey.
Of Iowa field hockey talk.
I want more. I want you to drop your wife more in the context of field hockey, Derek. If you don't know,
I'll bring her on. I'll bring her on next week.
That'd be great. We can bring her downstairs, and she can give. If they beat Maryland, I demand to have your wife come down here and break that down.
She would love it. She's a huge advocate for field hockey, so she would absolutely do it. No question.
There you go. Wonderful. Okay, good idea.
She should be at the game on Thursday, as should I think any Rutgers fan in the area that has time to go to watch a game on a Thursday afternoon. Huge game against Maryland. If you win that, you're right there with Iowa as the favorites to win the Big Ten, and you really solidify yourself as a national championship contender. So I guess we'll see. Much like Rutgers got a measuring stick game against Michigan in football, I think this is a big measuring stick game for Rutgers field hockey. If you start off 10-0, I mean, the sky is the limit really for Meredith Civico's team, which again, I can't say how impressive it is for them to have such a bounce back season after last year. Should be fun to follow the rest of the year.
All right. So soccer, unfortunately, is not doing as well.
Yes, men's soccer blew a 2-0 halftime lead against Michigan on Friday night. They're off to a pretty rough start. Women's soccer got back to the win column. They beat Purdue at home in a torrential rainstorm, which is good. Still some work to be done, but And volleyball, unfortunately, has lost 3 straight. They lost in straight sets to Purdue. So the early momentum is gone there. But field hockey, doing well.
Field hockey. Excellent. All right, folks. I think that's all we got this week. Until our picks pod coming up later on Thursday, you'll see what I do about the Wagner alumni. It's going to be a challenge. Until then, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.